And now I'm sure that the thing is working.
Well, let's keep our fingers crossed this time that we will both be visible and audible.
Yes.
And we apologize for our technical mishap from the other day.
Yeah. And I'll add to that, Bob, that the people who wrote and said, we couldn't hear Bob.
Some people would have thought that would have been a good thing.
Well, it's so the people on the 3 platforms that we generally post these things on. I'm sorry, but you're going to have to buy us a few more coffees so we're able to be more technically cute, because we certainly. I suspect I messed that up when we had that background noise and we tried to fix it, and well, we fixed it good.
Well, definitely falls under the hoop happens kind of thing. We've been going for 4 years, and I can't really think we've had a major glitch like that in the past. And it might happen in the future. Yeah.
Well, we're paying attention, and we apologize. But just to let you know that we've noticed that there's been some throttling of our videos on YouTube. Well, I used to say YouTube sometimes does things that the other platforms don't. So if you want to watch or hear this on YouTube, you're welcome to. But if you want to get the uncensored versions, generally you'll have to go to Substack or to Rumble, or listen to it on whatever audio platform you listen on. Nevertheless, the old saying is, don't forget to subscribe and don't forget to hit the like button.
Yes. So today we're going to talk about how we in Canada think that we are the epicenter of the universe. I guess that was the thrust of what we were trying to look at there. And, we managed to come across that story of that young woman who was refused entry into the United States. I don't think it made news anywhere else other than in Canada. I could be wrong, but I don't think that was big enough or important enough to hit the world news feeds. But it sure hit the airways here for a while.
Yes. And the question is, why is it so important?
Well, there was a couple of things that we had mentioned in the failed broadcast, and one of them was, right off the bat, we were leading a story the day before about how for the 9th or 10th consecutive month, trips from Canada to the United States were down over the same period last year. And I don't know if people didn't think that was true, or maybe they didn't know for sure, so the newspapers and the news media jumped right on that and found this young lady that was refused entry after waiting in line for an hour and a half to see the immigration customs person, border protection agent in Pearson Airport. It would seem to me, or indicate to me, that maybe travel isn't down, or perhaps we just had a massive influx of Americans that were heading back to the United States, and she got caught in the hour and a half lineup. That was just totally mind-boggling for me. On one hand, we're not traveling to the States, but on the other hand, we've got an hour and a half lineup wait for pre-flight clearance going into the United States. So, what is it, folks? Is this the classic case of my idol, Rex Murphy? We're trying to suck and blow at the same time here. I don't know.
Yeah, well, the juxtaposition to that report, of course, was that the media was going on about how traffic is down, as you said, and we shouldn't be going there because they're treating us so badly. Yet the next report, which was this woman being denied entry into the U.S., was a big deal. And so the question is, well, if you first started out with the premise that you shouldn't be going there in the first place because they're mean and nasty people, then why do you want to go there and then complain when they say, we don't want you to come here? I mean,
yeah.
And go ahead.
It's just that whole thing of I guess maybe it's just a Canadian thing. we don't really know what we want. We haven't really been given any direct leadership or guidance over the past decade in particular of what we think is good. We've had this megalomania thoughts that we are the geopolitical center of what goes on in the world. And I think even pre-production, they were talking about that, is that if you took a group of people from Europe, Africa, the United States, South America, Asia, and asked them to point Canada out on the map, I think a lot of them would have a hard time doing it. They'd be able to tell you where the United States is. They'd certainly be able to tell you maybe where France or Britain is, but you know, that big landmass that we think is the center of the well, I could say center of the universe, but it would be close. We're not so big on the overall scheme of things.
Yeah. Well, and you know, as you're saying that, it dawned on me that years and years ago, Canadians complained that the media spent more time talking about world news and world events and whatever than they talked about Canadian issues. And now we seem to have gone 180 degrees the other way, where we practically have no real reference outside of Canada on anything. We're become very introspective, and you know, as you said, we have this self-importance somehow that has evolved, suggesting that you know, a lot of people outside of Canada worry about what Canadians think or do or what have you, in spite of the fact that you know, every day we're told how important we are. For example, you know, the Liberal government has shipped nearly $400 million overseas for climate and agricultural projects. $400 million. That's, you know, this is a lot of money, and that's just a drop in the bucket compared to the other things that they've been spending on. And somehow all this largesse suggests that we're very important. Do you think for a moment that the recipients of our hard-earned taxpayers' dollars in Africa or Asia really care about Canada?
Well, and I guess the other side of that as well, and you mentioned pre-production, and you also mentioned that you had seen it on a YouTube channel. If we are so self-important and as big on the world stage as we think we are, why haven't any major leaders, you know, other than the king, he's about the only person I could think of that has any stature, to visit Canada in the last year?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If they're dropping into the United States to visit the Oval Office and see the president, we're an hour away by plane, maybe. None of those people have bothered to come up here and talk to our government. And if the Prime Minister is out signing all these bits and papers, you would think that they would be interested to come to see what's on the other side of that. It seems to me as though we've just had a leader that is jet setting around the world on the taxpayer dime, collecting autographs. I don't know. Maybe that's a bit cynical.
Well, I think we have a right to be cynical because these trips don't come cheap, and we only have a small percentage of the taxpayer population that can bear these costs. But you're right. You know, it's reminiscent of, as we talked in pre-production, it's like Chamberlain coming back from Munich in 1938 and waving this piece of paper about peace in our time. It's the same with this bunch coming back from trip after trip saying we've signed this agreement and that agreement and that understanding and that project. And yeah, okay, but what does it actually mean? It means nothing. You know, it's linked to the word salads we get from the Prime Minister every time he's asked a question of explain to the ordinary Canadian who is finding times tough, where all this investment money's coming from, and precisely the point that you made. If you're a big industrialist from country X and you're going to put billions into Canada, you would be getting your behind over here and wanting to see just exactly where is that money going to go. I mean, one of the dumbest things I saw the other day was some Swedish outfit was talking about, well, Saab will come over and manufacture planes here, because, the Griffin fighter planes here. You're not coming over here to manufacture a damn thing. They're coming over here because someone's going to give them a hell of a lot of money to pull Saab out of their economic malign at the moment, which is unless they sell a bunch of fighters to the Ukrainians, there's nowhere else to sell these things. And so
that's not like this has worked out well in the past. I can think of the Stellantis battery pack plant that was supposed to be in Ontario, the Volkswagen plant that was given, I think it was $13 billion.
Yeah,
it is now gone. So you're right. I mean, I'm jaded on the fact that we're going to give this money away, and we're probably not going to see anything about it. But I guess that also gets back into a bit of the thrust of what we were talking about with the plight of this young woman. Does she think that she was the center of this whole thing, that her visit to the United States was paramount to a Yalta agreement or something? I'm sorry. If the shoe was on the other foot, then it was a young American woman coming up. And this goes back for decades that you and I did this for a living. If the story doesn't add up, you're not going to get in. And in this particular case, for this young woman, you don't know the background. I'm sure that they just didn't pick her out as an example to be used. We don't know. Was she in the United States previously? Did she work? Did she overstay? Who were her grandparents? And we've mentioned before, I'm sure that the grandparents were American. There would be a congressional person coming up and having a chat with the Border Protection people and saying, well, one of our constituents was complaining that her granddaughter can't get down. Well, that's never happened.
Well, it's clearly no doubt that this was a concocted story to some extent, because they already had the immigration lawyer involved, and look, but it fell into the narrative that is being paid for by a subsidized media, or paid to a subsidized media, rather, by the government. You want to take your eye off the ball here. That's what this was about. They were extolling all the virtues of having stopped any relationship with the U.S. because that's all over, and then yet they run this story immediately afterwards about, well, this woman was denied entry. How dare they do that?
And it does go back to several points we made in previous broadcasts. The fact that we live next door to a large economic country. We have had, I won't say specialized treatment, we've had preferred treatment in the past, and we've come to expect it. And now that we're into the nitty-gritties of I don't know, spat is really all this is, we're not getting the same kind of treatment. So we've had the government, our relationship with the United States is over. Well, I don't, that was his opinion as the Prime Minister, but it was never debated in the House of Commons. It's never been out to the John Q. public of the world to say, is this true, is it not true? It was like his statement about having boots on the ground in the Ukraine. Never debated in Parliament. And I guess it gets down to this whole thing and focusing on this poor young woman that couldn't get in to do whatever she was going to do. And the fact that she had a valid Canadian passport. Well,
So
okay,
what?
but you know as well as I do that valid has a different meaning. If the passport's going to expire within 6 months of it being in the country, then you don't get into the country because that's just the way it is. It's written into the law.
Yeah.
And maybe, I don't want to disparage the LGBTQ community, but suppose her passport wasn't an M or an F in the sex field, it was an X. Well, the U.S. has already put out directives that it has to be a male or a female. It can't be anything else. So, it might be valid for us issuing the passport, but it wasn't valid for entry into the United States because it didn't meet certain requirements.
Right.
Which, on the, turning this around 180 degrees, if we had the same rules in place, I don't think that if that was a young woman from the United States presenting the same kind of a story and the same kind of ambiguity or unknowns, the probability is that the young U.S. woman would not have made it into Canada.
No.
And
that's... Go ahead, yeah.
We were talking about that the other day, too, that we're upset that we're going to be photographed and fingerprinted going into the United States and having our pictures taken on the way out. But how many of us Canadians travel to Europe where we have absolutely no problem in giving our passports to a hotel desk clerk, and we have absolutely no problem paying money and submitting photographs and maybe fingerprints to the European Union to get an entry certificate? It's the laws of the land that we have to be concerned with, not the laws of our imagined importance.
Well, that's the point. This narrative that is being promoted by, I dare say, the government through its subsidized media, and to take your attention away from things that are salient with respect to things that are real problematic in Canada. If an American being refused entry into Canada, which happens every day, I'm sure, coast to coast, is not newsworthy enough to put on CNN or MSNBC, okay, who would want to...
Fox or any other network.
Well, I picked those two because those are the ones that would carry the water for some, slight to Americans by someone else who's not allied with the U.S. Or in fact, if it was on a Fox, it'd be unbelievable news, wouldn't it? That Mary Jane was not allowed to go to Canada to visit her grandmother. How dare those Canadians do that? It's not news. And that puts things into perspective. That the American news is now following things like a far left socialist becoming mayor of New York. That's big time news. The mayor of Portland now is in the same shoes. That woman is there's a seismic shift happening in the urban centers of the U.S. To the far left, and they don't know what to do with it. And this is going to be far more important than someone not getting an entry to the U.S. to visit grandma. The fact that the Americans' largest aircraft carrier and newest one is bobbing around in the Caribbean, along with a whole fleet of other naval vessels to deal with Venezuela, that's news. Okay, they're even talking about in some of the quarters there that when they're done with dealing with Venezuela, they'll also deal with Cuba while they're at it. This is really big news. This is what the Barbara Frums of the olden days, when CBC actually had real newscasts, would talk about in the grander scheme of things and what's happening in the world. All we seem to be hung up on in the Canadian media is our self-importance, our dislike of Americans in the Trump presidency, and what a wonderful job our leadership is doing after 10 years, fixing what they've done for 10 years. I mean, it's almost silly. to listen to the excuses for 10 years of lousy management in this country, but suddenly in the last 6-7 months, there's been some sort of messiah that showed up from the very same bunch that wrecked the joint to fix it. So, in the meantime, in the geopolitically, the Monroe Doctrine or Manifest Destiny, whichever one of those things is currently on the minds of the elites in Washington and the military-industrial complex, is not concerned with what Canadians think or what Canadians do or what Canadians want or what we are insignificant in the scheme of things, And as you said, there's somebody in the White House every week going to with cap in hand to sign something with that administration, because that's where the money is, that's where the power is, and remarkably, there's absolutely no, like you said, while we're in Washington, let's just go up to Ottawa and see what we can do with those people in that pink part of North America on the map there. No, they're just not showing up. Okay, so we have to really come to grips with problems that we have in this country for sure. You've got serious problems in your neck of the woods with this whole business about who owns the land you're actually sitting on. I would recommend to all those people who start off every meeting at City Council thanking the native population for being allowed to even say anything in the council chambers to stop, because you're going to start a movement here among First Nations where I don't know if you're going to be able to restrict it to just talking. This can become very, very serious very quickly. And I don't think, from what I see with either the federal government, which is mute at the moment on anything that's going on in BC. I mean, it's almost as if it's not even happening. You don't hear a squeak out of the Canadian federal government on this. This is between your premier and the Indigenous population in BC.
Right.
Okay, so you've got 300,000 Indigenous people up against 5 million plus people who are not Indigenous. These are not good odds if you're going to get really uppity and start making trouble. So that's a story worth watching.
The other side of that is the fact that we've had the budget come down. There is nothing in place to address concerns from the two prairie provinces, Alberta, Saskatchewan. The line in the sand that Premier Smith has laid is either certainly very close or we're stepping on it. Nobody seems to be worried about that.
Nope.
We've got the province of Quebec that is, I think you're right, within a year we'll have another separation vote, and I don't think that the 50% plus one is that far out of line.
No,
it's
not.
So there's a lot of things that we have to be cognizant of. Yes, very, very Canadian-centered, but in the overall scheme of things, unless civil war breaks out in BC, or, dare I say, the First Nations war breaks out in BC, the two provinces to the immediate east of British Columbia secede and want to go away, and the big province of Quebec decides. That would make world news, and not the way that we would like it to be seen.
Exactly.
So yeah, let's concentrate on fixing what's going wrong with Canada. Starting with our political leadership.
Yeah.
Let's look at what is good for the country and get us going. And if it happens to mean that we go back to a north-south trading relationship and expanding east-west.
Yeah. But listen, this is the idiot king that ran the place for 10 years kept on saying that there was no business model for all sorts of projects. I'm going to say that there's no business model for us to suddenly expand into Asia or into Europe. Had there been a business model for that, we would have followed it for the last 50 years. Okay,
Yeah.
Canada is aligned, whether we like it or not, in a north-south geopolitical trade pattern. The vast majority of Canadians live within 100 miles of the U.S. border, period, from coast to coast. All right, that's where stuff comes up from. That's where stuff goes down to. Okay, that's just a normal business pattern. And while we can wax eloquently about how diversification here and there, whatever, what diversification is there when we have two oceans separating us from not only being able to ship the stuff cheaply, okay, because we also have the issue of whatever we make for those parts of the world isn't what gets used in this country. So from very basic things like when I make an appliance in Canada, it's a 110/60 cycles. I can ship it to the States because it's 110/60 cycles. If I want to ship it to the European Union, it's got to be 220/50 cycles, a different plug. Depends even on what country in the European Union, because even the plugs are different. That's as silly as it gets. But that's where things prove not to work. And the same thing occurs in Asia. We have technologically and industrially very few things in common with that part of the world. And when we have these fairy tales about we're going to ship LNG by the millions of gallons or cubic meters or whatever to Asia, well, we don't have the ships, never been built. We don't have the pipelines, never been built. These are piped. There's where you start talking like the Idiot King and you say, look, there's no business model for that. Because I don't see the Japanese Prime Minister coming to Ottawa, as we said earlier, and saying, we'd like to invest a couple of $billion into a pipeline into Kitimat or what's the other place on the West Coast where you could... Prince Rupert. You're not doing that. Okay, I don't see Macron coming over and saying, "Well, we need your timber. Let's take some of that timber so we can build houses in France." That's not happening. This is nonsense.
Well, even the one case where you have the German Chancellor come and make a case to get Canadian fossil fuels, it was vetoed because.
Didn't make the environmental.
Decided that there was going to be no pipeline through their territory.
Yeah.
So, we've had business cases, but.
And I might like to add, because we're coming up to the half hour, we said we'd make a short one today, is that 3 weeks ago, all we heard day in and day out was what was happening at Stellantis and GM and Ford and all these people that lost their jobs in Ontario because the plants are shutting down and moving to the U.S. For the last week, there's been radio silence on that. There's 15,000 or so people in this province that don't have a job in the last month. Okay, not only the workers in those plants, but the associated companies that make the knobs and the wires and whatever that were part of that supply chain, right? Suddenly, that's not news anymore. It's like they've been forgotten. But those people still have to put food on the table and pay their mortgages. Instead, we're
also a bit of a segue back to what we started out with. How many of those 15,000 people could end up in an hour and a half line to see a border protection individual agent and not be admitted? How many of those would qualify for a business or exemption or a permanent resident exemption to go and take up their job in where did Stellantis head in central United States? Are they now still going to be the big bad Americans? No. Those are going to be people that are very happy to have a job.
Yeah.
So, Rex Murphy, God bless that man, hit it right on the head. We are a nation of suckers and blows. And we're trying to do it at the same time, and it is just not working out.
Yeah, I agree.
And I don't know what's going to fix that.
Well, I think we'll have some interesting chats once this 17th is when they're going to vote on the budget, I think. Once our self-importance will rise to the surface once again, we'll be hearing all kinds of stuff, and we'll have to do a post-mortem on that. But I already suspect it'll be a depressing episode because I just don't see a light at the end of the tunnel.
The way our parliamentary system works, all the current government needs is 2 people to vote with it. Or in the event of a tied vote, they go to the Speaker of the House, who is a Liberal, and who, according to Robert's rules, will vote with, whether he agrees or she agrees with it or not, will vote with the government. That's just the way it is. So it'll be interesting, but it won't be a big surprise one way or the other.
Well, I think that the future in either event is still going to be very, very rocky, and there's nobody coming to save us, is what I'm trying to say, I guess. We're going to have to figure it ourselves. All right, well, let's reconvene after the budget, and I will listen to all the pundits, and then we'll throw in our 2 cents worth, and we'll take it from there.
Well, that's right, because your 2 cents and my 2 cents is worth more.
Well, that's right, and that's 4 cents, and it costs 4 cents to make a cent. So 4 cents times 4, that's 16 cents worth of smarts.
Ooh. Still not quite 2 bits, but
all right. Well, I shall see you shortly, meaning after the budget.
I know.
All right.
Yes.
Don't forget, say like.
Hit the like.
Yep.
Hit the like. Buy us a coffee.
Yep. All right. See you soon.
You bet.